Have you ever shared a big goal with someone, a business idea, a book, a life you wanted to build, and felt that rush of excitement, almost like you'd already done it, and then never actually did it? Think about the last time you achieved something truly significant. Did you announce it, or did you go quiet and simply emerge one day with something real? Science has a name for what's happening. Psychologists call it social reality. When you share a goal and others acknowledge it, your brain releases dopamine, the same reward triggered by actual achievement. It partially confuses the telling with the doing, and the hunger that was supposed to fuel your journey quietly dies. This is an ancient truth wise men understood long before psychology had a name. What if the first step toward your dreams isn't waking up earlier or working harder, but simply learning to be silent? This is the story of an old man, a young boy, a dying candle, and the most powerful lesson ever taught in complete silence. In a small mountain village, far from the noise of any city, far from the endless scroll of screens and the constant chatter of the modern world, there lived an old carpenter named Elias. Elias was 74 years old. His hands were rough like bark, cracked at the knuckles, stained permanently with wood oil and sawdust. His eyes were deep and calm, like a river in winter, slow on the surface, but powerful underneath. His workshop sat at the edge of the village, a single-room structure built from stone and timber, warm in winter, cool in summer, always smelling of cedar and linseed oil. Elias had been a carpenter for over 50 years. In that time, he had built more things than he could remember: chairs, tables, doors, cabinets, bridges, entire houses. Pieces of his work existed in homes across 3 regions. A merchant in a distant town had paid a remarkable sum for one of Elias's cabinets and displayed it in his entrance hall like a piece of art. But the villagers knew Elias not for what he built. They knew him for what he never talked about. Elias never boasted, never announced, never told anyone what he was working on, what he planned to create, what vision he held in his mind. He simply disappeared into his workshop before dawn, sometimes as early as 4:30 inches the morning, while the village was still wrapped in darkness, and then weeks or months later, something magnificent would appear: a carved wooden gate at the edge of the market, a bridge over the creek that flooded every spring, a cabinet so beautifully jointed that people would travel from neighboring villages just to run their fingers over the seams and wonder how human hands had made something so precise. When people asked him how he did it, Elias would shrug and say, "I just worked." When people asked what he was building next, he would smile quietly and say, "You'll see." He lived alone. His wife, Maria, had passed 15 years earlier, a loss that had broken him open, and somehow, through the breaking, had made him deeper. His 2 children had grown and moved to the city. They called on Sundays. They visited at Christmas. But his daily life was simple, solitary, and completely intentional. His only regular company was a 16-year-old boy named Marcus. Marcus was the son of Elias's neighbor, a farmer named Yosef, who was kind but exhausted, working long hours in the fields and raising Marcus largely alone, since his wife had taken a job in the city to supplement the family income. Marcus had started appearing at Elias's workshop 2 years earlier, not because anyone sent him, not because school assigned it, but because something about the old man's workshop felt different from everywhere else in the village. It felt like the only place where something real was happening. Marcus was a boy overflowing with potential and noise. He was bright genuinely, obviously intelligent in the way that teachers notice and parents celebrate. He was creative, curious, capable of thinking in ways that surprised adults who expected teenagers to be shallow. He had energy that seemed to have no natural limit, enthusiasm that filled whatever room he entered, and a gift for making people around him feel excited about the future. But Marcus was also 16. And he had never finished a single thing he started. At 14, he announced he was going to learn to play the guitar. He described to his classmates the band he would form, the songs he would write, the concerts he would eventually perform. His parents bought him a guitar. He played it with great intensity for 11 days. It now lived under his bed, strings slightly loose, gathering the particular dust that accumulates on abandoned dreams. At 15, he told everyone he was writing a novel. He described the plot in vivid detail to anyone who would listen: the characters, the twists, the themes, the title, the dedication page. He wrote 14 pages. They were actually quite good. Then he stopped. He wasn't sure why. The excitement had just evaporated. In the months leading up to this story, Marcus had announced plans to start a small business selling handmade goods online, to learn coding, to run a half marathon, and to teach himself 3 languages simultaneously. Everyone in the village smiled when Marcus talked. He was charming, passionate, electric. Adults said, "That boy is going places." His teacher said, "Marcus has so much potential." But potential, as Elias would soon teach him, is just a word people use for fire that hasn't been aimed yet. One cold afternoon in late October, Marcus burst into Elias's workshop in the way he always entered spaces, fast, breathless, full of something he couldn't contain. "Elias, I have the most incredible idea. Are you listening? This is the one. I can feel it." Elias did not look up from the piece of oak he was carefully planing. The thin curls of wood fell silently to the floor. "I'm going to build the best furniture workshop in this entire region. Not just the village, the whole region. I've already told my friends. I told my Uncle Benedict. I told my teacher, Mr. Havel. I told the guys at school. Everyone thinks it's brilliant. My uncle said it's the best idea he's heard in years. My teacher said I should write a business plan. My friend Tomas said he'd invest if I ever needed money." Elias planed the wood, slowly, steadily. The workshop was quiet except for the soft scraping rhythm of the tool. Marcus continued. He described the layout of the workshop he imagined. The types of furniture, modern designs, he said, mixed with traditional techniques. The customers he would target, the prices he would charge, the reputation he would build, the apprentices he would eventually hire. He talked about his vision for 15 solid minutes, voice rising and falling with excitement, hands moving to illustrate dimensions and designs. Elias worked in silence. Finally, Marcus stopped. He realized the old man had not responded once. "Elias, did you hear anything I said?" Elias set down his plane. He straightened slowly, the way old men do when their backs remind them of 50 years of labor. He looked at Marcus with calm, unreadable eyes. "I heard every word," he said. "Tell me something. How many hours did you spend this week telling people about this idea?" Marcus thought back. He had told his friends at lunch on Monday. He'd called his uncle Tuesday evening. That was almost 2 hours. He'd stayed after class to tell his teacher on Wednesday. He'd talked about it at dinner with his father Thursday night. Maybe 5 or 6 hours? Maybe more. People were really excited. "And how many hours did you spend actually working on it? Drawing plans, researching materials, learning technique, building anything at all?" The workshop went completely silent. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. His face changed the brightness, dimming slightly, something honest and uncomfortable rising to the surface. "0, he said quietly. "But," he started, "I was building momentum, getting people excited, getting support. You need to tell people your vision if you want them to believe in you, right?" Elias said nothing. He walked slowly to a small shelf on the far wall, a shelf Marcus had always noticed but never examined closely. On it sat a sealed glass jar. Inside the jar, a small white candle burned with a steady, contained flame, golden and peaceful behind the glass. "Come here," Elias said. Marcus crossed the workshop and stood beside the old man. Elias held the jar up so the flame was level with Marcus's eyes. The boy could feel the faint warmth even through the glass. Then Elias slowly unscrewed the lid. The moment fresh air rushed in, the flame exploded, a sudden dramatic flare, bright and beautiful, reaching upward with fierce energy. Spectacular for exactly 3 seconds. And then it died. Completely. Instantly. The jar was dark. A thin thread of smoke rose and disappeared. "That," said Elias quietly, "is what happens when you open your dream to too much air, too soon." Marcus stared at the darkened jar. He felt something shift inside him, not the surface-level excitement he usually felt when someone said something clever, something deeper, quieter. "Sit down," Elias said. "I want to tell you something that took me 50 years to learn, and I'm going to try to save you the 50 years. They sat across from each other, the old carpenter in his worn wooden chair, the boy on the low stool he always used, and outside the workshop window, the October light was going gray and soft. "When a dream is new," Elias began, "it is not strong. It feels strong. It feels enormous, urgent, unstoppable. But that feeling is not strength. It is just pressure, like steam building inside a closed pot. And steam, Marcus, needs to be converted into motion before it is released. If you release it into the air before it has turned the wheel, it is simply gone." He laced his fingers together on his knee. "Here's what your brain does. And this is not philosophy. This is mechanics. When you describe your dream to excited people and they say, 'That's brilliant, Marcus,' you're going to be amazing. Your brain registers something very close to the feeling of having already achieved it. It doesn't fully distinguish between doing and telling. So it releases a small dose of the reward chemical. And that chemical, when it flows, reduces urgency. It signals, we've already moved, we can rest. And you walk away from the conversation feeling satisfied not because you built anything, but because you described building it and received applause for the description. Marcus was very still. This is why, Elias continued, his voice neither kind nor harsh, simply factual. You have announced 17 plans in the 3 years I have known you, and completed none. The number hit Marcus like cold water. 17. He hadn't counted. But sitting there in the quiet workshop, he knew the old man was right. Maybe it was even more. So what do I do? Marcus asked. His voice was smaller than usual. Elias looked at him for a long moment. Then he held up one thick, scarred finger. Rule 1. Keep your dream inside until you have earned the right to speak it. What does that mean, earn the right? It means you have something to show. Not a plan, not an idea, not a vision board or a goal list. Something real. A physical object. A finished page. A first sale. One completed design. When you have that, when you have held proof in your hands, then you may speak. Because by then, the speaking doesn't drain you. The fire is already too strong to be killed by attention. You are not sharing a fragile seedling. You are showing people a tree. A second finger. Rule 2. Choose silence as your shield, not your punishment. I want you to understand this carefully. I am not telling you to be ashamed of your dreams. I am not telling you that secrecy is the same as fear. Silence is not hiding. Silence is protecting. Your idea in its earliest days is the most vulnerable it will ever be. At that stage, one discouraging word from the right person at the wrong moment can kill it. And just as dangerous, one round of enthusiastic praise can also kill it, for the reason I just described. He paused and looked at the dead candle jar on the shelf. The world is full of people who will have opinions about your idea before you have the strength to defend it. Some will discourage you with logic that sounds reasonable, but is really fear dressed up in rational clothes. Some will excite you with praise that feels like fuel but actually steals your fire. Both are dangerous when you are fragile. You must be further down the road before you expose yourself to either. A third finger. Rule 3. Let your results speak first and let them speak so loudly that people come to you. The most powerful statement you will ever make is not something you say. It is something you build while no one was watching. When you emerge from silence with something real, something undeniable, something that people can hold or see or experience, that is the moment they lean in. That is when your story becomes something worth telling. Not because you announced it, but because it announced itself. Marcus sat quietly for almost a minute. The wind moved outside. A branch scraped against the stone wall of the workshop. Did you always work this way? He finally asked. From the beginning? Elias shook his head slowly. No, I learned it the hardest way possible. He looked at his hands. When I was about your age, maybe a year older, I had a vision for a chair. I had seen a design in a book. An old European design. Incredibly complex joinery, carved armrests, a seat that curved exactly right for the human body. I became obsessed with building it. I sketched it for weeks. And then, like you, I started telling people. He paused. I told my father. I told my teacher. I told every craftsman in the village. I described that chair in such detail, over so many months, that people began calling it Elias's chair, even though it didn't exist. It became a legend before it was built. And the legend grew so large, so heavy with expectation, that when I finally sat down to build it, I froze. The gap between the chair and my words and what my hands could actually produce felt impossible. And underneath the paralysis was something else. The satisfaction I had already received from all those conversations. I had already lived the dream in my mouth. My hands had nothing left to chase. He was quiet for a moment. I never built that chair. 60 years later, I still think about it. Not with regret exactly, but with a clarity that took me decades to earn. I know now that I talked that chair to death. He looked at Marcus directly. Don't talk your life to death, boy.